Hi guys, we are just waiting for everyone to log in and then we'll get started. We'll just give it one more minute for the rest of the participants to log in. Okay, people are still coming in, but we are going to get started. And this webinar will be recorded. So if you have to step out, you will get that recording. So welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, just pop them in the Q&A box. And if we have time at the end of the webinar, we'll answer them. And if we run short on time, we will answer them in an FAQ that we'll email you guys out after the webinar. So let's get stuck into it. My name is Jess Panteloresco and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Vision 6. For those of you who are new to this series, Vision 6 is Australia's most trusted email and SMS marketing platform. Now, I'm really excited for today's webinar topic because we have an amazing co-host, the team who have given new life to our paid advertising, Stuart Morton-Wild from Hello Digital.
Thank you very much. You're too kind. It's a pleasure to be here.
Stuart Morton-Wild is co-founder and director at the Brisbane-based agency Hello Digital, and for the last 17 years, he has been helping brands like Vision 6 grow market share. And for the last 6 months, he has been managing Vision 6's paid ad strategy. So our life is in his hands, which sounds a little bit scary, but partnering with the right SEM agency has been key for Vision 6 navigating the current climate. And what we want to do today is share that journey and some of those learnings with you guys, so you can put your company in the best position possible and maintain growth both now and well into the future. So we want to encourage you guys to not let your perception of events cloud your judgment. So LinkedIn and Microsoft were both founded during times of economic crisis. So what we want to do today is really look for the opportunity in a crisis. Now, the quote on the screen reads, at this willing acceptance, now at this very moment, of all external events is one of my favorite quotes generally, but I think it holds extra power with everything that we're seeing in the world today. And it's been used as a framework for some of the most robust entrepreneurs of all time. Rockefeller, Edison, and Steve Jobs all used it when obstacles confronted them, because to them, the obstacle was the path to greater success. And a global crisis may feel like a crater of an obstacle, but there is a huge silver lining for your business, because it becomes really easy to determine the gaps and opportunities in the market. We have greater visibility into the industries and the customer segments that are thriving versus those that are struggling and may not rebound for a while. So a little research into employment rates is going to show you what industries are hiring during a crisis. And those industries that are hiring the most are going to have the most money to spend. And those that are pulling back are, obviously struggling. So what you could then do is identify your largest or your most lucrative customer segments and compare them to the list of industry sectors that you found. And if there's a match, channel all your efforts into targeting that market. And if there's not a match, then that's, might be a perfect time to pivot your strategy and attract a new customer segment. And likewise, you can use this opportunity to revisit your campaigns and promote your services to meet the changing customer needs. So we did exactly that at Vision 6. You guys know that we're an email and SMS marketing platform. So we service primarily a B2B customer base that's made up of agencies and internal marketers just like yourself. Email marketing is obviously a tool that can be used by every single business on the planet. So as you can imagine, our advertising audience can be really tricky to narrow down. So we did some digging around. We found a list of Australian industries that were hiring high quantities of staff, and we then narrowed that list down to the companies that fit within our ideal customer profile. And we started an advertising campaign that was specifically targeting these people on Google Ads, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also packaged our product up in a way that would be most useful to them. And consequently, we were able to gain new customer segments. So it definitely works. It's tried and tested, and I definitely recommend giving that a go. Another strategy is to change the ad message. So using short-term price incentives that match the current economic climate with customers who might be chasing a good deal. So you can promote interest-free loans, discounts, or special promotions to boost sales. And when the economy bounces back, go back to regular pricing. And for those of you that don't give cost incentives, you could try to change the ad message to focus on solving the job that the customer is trying to do. So you want to point out the value that your brand provides. This theory is called jobs to be done. And we use it as the framework for literally every single thing that we do at Vision 6. So from product development through to talking to customers on the phone. And the theory basically revolves around the idea that people don't simply buy products or services, rather they hire them to make progress in specific circumstances. So for example, let's say you're a retail store that sells vacuum cleaners. You might develop a use case that assumes your audience wants to get their floor as clean as possible when they vacuum. But in that statement, we're focusing on an existing solution rather than the actual job the person is trying to do. So if there's a better, cheaper, faster way to get their floors clean that doesn't involve a vacuum, they're probably going to buy that instead. So instead, you might want your audience, you might say to them, maintain a clean living space. So that statement is focusing on the outcome of the job and not on the solution. And guys, I can't recommend the use of this framework enough. After this webinar, go A/B test your ad copy and come back and share your results with us, because I guarantee you will not be disappointed. I should also mention this webinar is not sponsored by Jobs to be Done. We just really like it. So you go try some things, you rework your ad message, you provide some incentives, and when the market does come back, you could also be recognized by your existing customers by how you handle the challenge facing them. So if you're in a position to do so, offering something of value for free, it's not only going to build loyalty with your existing customers, but it's likely to create that goodwill where they might be compelled to refer your business. So ideally, you'd be doing things that you might otherwise do either for free or at charge. So some examples are running a webinar. It's a great idea. Creating a white paper on bouncing back, providing one of your services at a lower rate or for free for a period of time, or you could address some other pain points that your customers would value in a low to no cost way. So what you shouldn't be doing is contracting spend. Now, I know it's a very natural instinct in times of economic recession, but one of, if not the single worst thing you can do in a crisis is cut back on your advertising and marketing budget. I know I sound insane, but bear with me. As a recession looms, you might find your boss tightening the reins on your marketing budget, and she might see the decline in sales demand as a signal to cut budgets and save money. But there is absolutely no reason to panic and no reason to pull the plug on spending, because consumers may not be spending like they were before, but they do spend. So like we said before, you just need to figure out where and how they're spending. So what you actually want to do is push for more advertising budget, because as you know, branding is a long-term game and it needs to be consistent. More than likely, your competitors are being cautious and potentially cutting back on their share of voice, which we know one of the biggest drivers of sales is your share of voice. There are several other reasons to advertise during a slowdown. A few other advertisers that would normally be taking up inventory on platforms probably aren't, which means fewer competitors bidding for the same positions. The media in that case would be cheaper and continue to get cheaper, at least for a while. And it's also a good PR exercise, because the harder you market during a recession or a slowdown period implies you have corporate stability. So brands and businesses that reduce their spends during times of recession, they often come out the other side finding it a lot harder to recover. History tells us on average that marketing budget should be protected and not rated for recovery. So let's look at some examples of brands who have benefited by maintaining their ad budgets during economic downturn. So this is a fun one. Dry cereal. So in the 1920s, Post was the leader in ready-to-eat cereal category. During the Great Depression, Post cut back significantly on its advertising budget, and rival Kellogg's doubled its advertising spend, investing heavily in radio and introducing a new product called Rice Krispies, featuring Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Kellogg's profits grew by 30%, and the company became the category leader, and it's a position that it's maintained for decades. So the next example is imported cars. So in the 17-month recession of 1973 to 75 was triggered by the energy crisis. And in late 73, the US government issued its first miles per gallon report, where Toyota Corolla was second to Honda Civic in fuel efficiency. Since Toyota was experiencing strong sales when the economic downturn hit, the temptation was to drop their ad budget, which they resisted. So by sticking to their long-term strategy, Toyota surpassed Volkswagen as the top imported car maker in the US by 1976. So the next example is fast food restaurants. In the 1990 to 91 recession, Pizza Hut and Taco Bell took advantage of McDonald's decision to drop their advertising and promotional budget. As a result, Pizza Hut increased sales by 61%, Taco Bell sales grew by 40%, and McDonald's sales declined by 28%. What a McBummer. Technology. Amazon sales grew by 28% during the 2009 Great Recession. The brand continued to innovate with new products during the slumping economy, most notably with the new Kindle products, which helped grow market share. In a first on Christmas Day 2009, Amazon customers bought more ebooks than printed books. As a result, in the mind of customers, Amazon became an innovative company by introducing a lower cost alternative to cash-strapped customers. So I know the natural inclination is probably to cut back on advertising during a recession, but the brands that maintained their ad budget and just changed their messaging slightly do get a long-lasting boost in sales and market share. So bringing it back to you, how do you confidently allocate budget when you're under intense pressure to trim the fat? So I know that it can be stressful navigating the world of paid advertising during normal times, let alone a pandemic. So I'm going to hand this over to the professionals. Stuart, where do we start and what should we be doing?
Well, first, let me say thanks for hosting this fantastic webinar. It's really exciting to be a part of the series, and I'm sure we're all going to take away some valuable insights. I know I already have. I'm definitely going to remember some of those examples from the dry cereal in particular, and there's an example I have coming up that's going to echo that. But especially agree with not just knee-jerk reacting at all, really, but especially in regards to contracting your spend. As we're about to see, though, it's not as simple as just continuing the spend as normal and echoing, Jess's strategic points on adjusting your message and adapting. That's really the core of what we need to do to be able to respond to the crisis. So if we're going to continue our marketing spend, let's dig into how we can do so wisely by building a strategy from the ground up. Little note, some of this for some of you is going to be kind of 101, but really it's an exercise in, I guess, getting back to basics, because we are going to be having to adapt and not be able to rely on some of the assumptions that we normally would. So it's a good time to get back to basics. So, there's no silver bullet, and whether there is or isn't, it's absolutely essential to identify that every business will face unique circumstances. Just as every industry is different from every other industry, every business within those industries is different to their competitors. So let's start by laying a solid foundation of research and analysis to understand where we sit within that situation. So start with your research. Read widely, focus on credible outlets such as The Economist, the AFR, challenge the sources, challenge the authors. Sometimes the author is more important than the publication. Don't just take things with a grain of salt. There's a lot of content marketing out there which can be useful, but there's a lot out there that has been really pushed out. So make sure you're looking at ideally peer-reviewed studies or anything that has a good sample behind it. Aside from the new information you're bringing in, you're going to be working with information that you already have. And even from that new information, you're going to build assumptions. So, don't just know your assumptions, list them. put pen to paper. Doing that exercise and some of the other exercises that we're going to provide to you, will just get the cogs turning and get the ideas flowing. So list your assumptions with pen and paper and challenge them. Don't assume that any of those are still going to apply, because sometimes challenging that status quo, that's where the creative strategies are going to come from. There are no bad ideas in a brainstorm. So even when you're in the same situation as everyone else, your individual situation is still unique within that bigger picture. Through your research, you want to build an idea of how the crisis is likely to affect you. Then ask yourself, if the crisis is likely to affect you more, less, or the same as your competitors. For example, maybe your competitors are, in a different location to you. Maybe they've got different state laws. Does this present opportunities or challenges for you compared to them? What do you think that's going to do to their strategy and their spend? Brainstorm all of this and get it written down. Then, I guess, revisit what you're already doing with your marketing. So, once you feel you have researched thoroughly and are fluent in what's going on in the world, in the broader market, with your customers and with your competition, you can then consider how your marketing needs to change to adapt to the situation at hand. So essentially, to cap off your research and analysis, there's a couple of exercises you can conduct. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with these, but don't just think of these as standalone. Think of them as a gap analysis from your marketing mix from before or currently, before the crisis or where it is now, to your ideal future marketing mix to respond to the crisis. So by using a pest analysis, obviously, with this particular crisis, it's not just economic. There's a lot of political things going on at the moment. There is massive social change. People, there's definitely been a shake-up. People are looking at what they want to do with their lives and what's valuable to them. There's also been technological change. People are spending more time inside. So, conducting a pest analysis can really help you get a better situation of the bigger picture. And then by looking at the SWOT against that, you can position yourself within that bigger picture by looking at the sort of internal and external factors that essentially frame your current situation. So by doing that, you can use pest and SWOT as a lens to help you see how your marketing mix needs to change. So whether you're already using the 7 Ps or whether you don't use that, you can very quickly use that as an exercise to work out, what are you doing with your product place, price, promotion, people, processes, and physical environment. And then with your understanding of not just, the situation at large, and especially what's going to be, the reality for your customers, but you can also then, use your SWOT to understand how each one of those 7 Ps might need to change to adapt to making sure that you're meeting the current moment. So one example of what happens if you don't adapt your marketing mix to meet the moment is the recent KFC example. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but I am sure that everyone is familiar with the position line, finger looking good. For obvious reasons, this position line came across a bit tone deaf in the middle of the COVID pandemic when we're talking about social distancing, washing hands, and not touching our faces. So, whether that's damaging or not is not really the point. It just seems tone deaf. And it's not just a waste of money, but, it's not going to put KFC in a good position with their customers. And it's not just their advertising. I mean, when we're looking at the 7 Ps, how does that affect your physical environment if you have a store? Even if you don't have a store, what's the physical environment for your customers? Are they on your website? Are they sitting in their lounge? You've got to think about all these elements and how that's going to change and what the implications are for your strategies. So, the solution to all this is easy. We do the research, we analyze the situation, we adapt our marketing mix to meet the moment. Once we've done that and we have an idea of how that needs to change, we can set some high level goals. And again, this is 101 stuff, but this is the kind of time where we want to get back to basics and shine a light on any uncertainty and just re-establish some of those foundations. So, ask yourself questions to chip away at this and come up with some answers. Why are we advertising? Are we, are we looking to generate leads? Are we looking to develop brand awareness? Are we looking to break into new markets, maybe in relation to the crisis? Maybe something's dropped off somewhere. So really understand what that is and why, and then, understand those desired future outcomes, business outcomes, and then use those to define those into high-level goals. Once we have high-level goals, then we can convert those essentially by unpacking them into clear objectives. So an objective, I guess, different to a goal. Sometimes these get conflated. A goal is high level, it's the place we want to go to. An objective is one of the steps on the road in getting there. And it's generally, I guess, something that's more actionable. So what we look for with objectives is that they are specific, actionable, and measurable. And I'll underline measurable because it's not just important that we know what we're doing and that we can do them, but that we can understand how close we are to achieving them. This is important because we don't just have marketing reports to see some interesting data. We have them so that we can measure where we are, so that we can recalibrate and adjust our strategy to make sure that we're aiming for our targets. So a good example of an objective that is specific, actionable, and measurable is close at least 25 sales per month over 3 months at a minimum return on ad spend of 300%. You might be surprised at just how many people, when you ask them for goals, they say more sales. And it's like, well, it's very hard to carve out a path unless it's that specific. So once we have those sorts of objectives, an objective is not a target. So if you're working with an internal team, whether you're managing it yourself because you're doing it yourself, or you might be working with an external agency, you need to be able to set targets and KPIs. So whilst the objective is somewhere that we want to land, the KPI or the target is something that we can aim for at any point in this. So, an example of some targets that can be extracted from the previous example objective would be a sales volume target of 25 sales per month, and then a separate minimum return on ad spend target of 300%. So it's all well and good to set targets, but we need to be realistic. And in many cases, especially in digital marketing, the way to win is really to think like an economist when we're looking at this side of it, at least, more than a marketer. So we have these economic factors of, how many, let's say we're focusing on leads. How many leads do we want? How much are we willing to pay for them? Or how much do we need to pay for them to make sure that our campaigns are on track? And what time frame do we need them in? And what quality do they need to be? So, unless you are massively undercapitalized on your budget, you are very unlikely to be able to maximize all of those factors at once. Once we start to reach some sort of scale, we call it the law of diminishing returns in economics, then you are going to come up against some limitations, and you're going to have to pick whether you want them sooner, better quality, but more expensive, for example, or cheaper, maybe lower quality, and sooner. So, you really just got to pick your priorities and compromise and be realistic about that. We've conducted our research, we've worked out where we sit in the big picture, we've looked at our competitors and what we need to do to adapt our existing state of our marketing campaigns to where we need to get to. So how does that actually look? What channels are we going to run? This is the fun bit. So I guess, when we're looking at our channel mix, there's a lot of go-to options. The key options that I guess most of us would look to when we're looking to make something happen, especially digitally, would be organic search, content marketing, paid search, display, and social. So there's obviously some other things you can do, and if you have no option but to contract your spend, some of these, there's more that you can do within these without necessarily spending, but we're going to focus on how we can execute activities in these channels accurately during the crisis and not have to contract our spend. So when we're looking at organic search and content marketing, The key things here are it's demand based. So, you know, when we're looking at some of these other ones, we're sort of going to people where they are. Whereas with anything search, people are actively searching for something. So as long as you've gotten your campaigns right, or you've done your SEO right, you are putting yourself in the path of someone who is looking for something. So the thing is that where this gets strategic is when do we need the results? So if you have if you have cash flow issues now, and you need to work out what to do, and you need some results in the short term, and you had to pick between, say, organic search and paid search, you would not go with organic search. You know, typically you're looking at 4 to 6 months to start getting some traction, and the ROI comes after that. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It can be massively worth doing, because you can end up getting the same sort of traffic that would cost 10 times more on paid than as you would with organic. But you know, so you really got to think about, what do you want, when do you want it? This is why we focus on those objectives and those goals. So, for example, if you are looking to have a strong recovery in 6 months from now, and you have maybe some spend on paid media on search, you could shift that into SEO if you're not focused on short-term sales, and you could see those sales start to come in when the recovery is back. However, yeah, if it's the flip side, then you would focus more on paid. So knowing those factors is super important. The other thing is that if you don't have any budget, and particularly if you're a small business and you haven't got a lot of SEO optimization going already, start blogging. Hopefully you've got the time on your hands to learn how to do that, or you're creative enough. But if you're able to do that, that's a very straightforward, easy way to be able to get some traction moving. And even if it's not perfectly optimized, your agency should be able to help you optimize it after the fact. And that's something that you can get going now without having to really spend too much money. But you know, outsourcing that content can be expensive. So again, we need to consider what our goals are. So looking at paid search, so this is, you know, we can get campaigns online faster here. We can get a quicker path to getting results. It's still demand based. So if they're not searching, you're not spending. And so as long as we're targeting high intent, relevant traffic, we can't go wrong. And I have a client example and this happened for quite a few of our clients, who he was considering dropping his spend immediately. And in fact, he did it for about a week or so. But we had a look into what was happening for him, and we noticed that people were still searching, but he and his competitors had dropped out of the race. So we encouraged him to jump back in, and his share of voice went from less than 40% to more than 90%. His conversion rate jumped from 9% to above 15%, and his CPC dropped by more than half to below $2. So this was because everyone else had the knee-jerk reaction. They dropped their spend, they dropped out of the race, and he's there collecting. Yes, the total pool of potential sales was smaller for everyone, but because everyone else dropped out, the opportunity for him was that he ended up capturing more of those sales than he was before due to lower competition. So, you know, this is an example of how paid search is powerful in its demand-based nature. But it does have limitations, because that demand is great because it creates, it is based on intent, and it's direct, and we can predict it, but it is limited. So you're limited to that demand. You can't go out and generate demand. That's more what you're doing on paid social and with your display activities and so on. So when we're looking at, I guess, any of these activities, we're bringing people onto our website, and we want to be you know, making sure that we're tracking everything that's going on there, and building lists and retargeting, sending messages via retargeting to those people that have shown an interest in our business or our brand. So this is not just about, I'm sure we're all familiar with retargeting, the ads that follow us around. This is not just about, you know, getting that message in front of people and getting them to buy. It can also be about retaining existing client or customer relationships. And at the end of the day, if you get it right and you get your frequency right on it and everything, it becomes a part of the overall picture, another touch point to help you leverage from your other activities. particularly important if you're facing reduced spend or the need to trim fat, because again, this one is similar to search and other elements. It's based on the number of people in the list. So these people are already qualified. They've already come to the site and they're engaged. So this is a great way to leverage everything else that you're already doing. And moving over to the paid social example. So, these channels are different to search in that it's not demand-based. You're going out to people while they're doing something else. They're talking to friends, they're chatting, they're looking at photos, they're browsing. So they're not necessarily looking for your product at that time. If you are running paid social, I'd definitely recommend, if you don't have at least good SEO results, that you would be running some paid search, because people quite often, maybe they see it on paid social, it sparks their interest, but nothing is so direct as just, they go from seeing your ads straight to purchase. There's generally a few other touch points in there. And if people are interested, they're most likely to search for you. Whilst this isn't demand-based, and that means that we don't have a clear path to getting results, because we need to sort of, be able to experiment and test and work out what works when we throw our messages out there. Yes, we can get nice and targeted before that fact, but there's still more of an element of research and experimenting before, as compared to the search channels. The benefit of this, though, and the power, is that it offers massive potential reach. So if you have only 5,000 available searches per month, but you know that you've got potentially tens of thousands of customers out there in Australia, for example, you should be able to push to millions of people, assuming that your target market could be that big. So, this is a way to be able to generate demand. But the other thing to keep in mind is that even when you do get it right, this medium, like any other display medium, is highly reliant on the creative. So, if that creative gets out there, maybe it could be a frequency of 3, 5, or 10. And by the way, frequency is the number of times that an individual has actually seen your creative. At a certain point, that frequency, when we hit that frequency, we'll start to see that people will be dropping off or less interested in what we're putting out there. So you do need to turn over the creative. So in some cases, whilst paid search is definitely not set and forget, paid social can be a lot more involved on the labor side. So something to keep in mind for your internal teams, but especially if you're outsourcing to an agency. Typically it's going to be more expensive per hour, and you want to get the best bang for buck when you're doing that. So being realistic about your budgets, how much time you have to spend and get that right, is going to be absolutely essential. And this is something that you should factor in with what we were talking about earlier with your objectives and looking at targets and budgeting and so on. So that leaves essentially, the connective tissue that connects all these channels together to make sure that we have a multi-channel, large number of touch points kind of strategy. So when we do that, we want to look at the customer experience and try and put yourself in their shoes and understand the process they're going through. Now, obviously, the key one here is marketing automation and EDM, but as well SMS. People are spending more time at home on their devices. Let's talk to them. Have you got a live chat on your website? Don't bombard them with EDMs, SMS, but integrate it into the conversation you're having with them, right from the point that you generate the awareness with the first ad that they see of yours, right through them landing on the landing page, and then continuing to nurture the relationship once they've become a lead. And just need to re-emphasize the fact that multi-channel is key to get a solid, to really get your brand, I guess, worked in with your customers' experience and their journey. So, increasing those touch points and making sure you're a part of that is absolutely essential, whether we're in a crisis or not, but obviously that could change depending on what your situation is within that crisis. And of course, I guess, once we have all that together and we know what our strategy needs to be and how we need to adjust our marketing mix and what the best channels are that we need to face in this crisis and really challenge your assumptions on those channels as well, we need to make sure that we're essentially looking to the golden cycle of testing, measuring, analysis, and optimization. So if we set our objectives right and our targets right, we should be able to measure those and make optimizations and changes to steer our results to be on track to what we're aiming for. Nice and straightforward, but at the end of the day, this is something that you should have a good handle on before you get started. And we have a tool that's available to you and the resources there that will help you not just understand your customer acquisition cost, but there's also a table in there that will, it provides a table for doing projections, channel-based projections that can help you work out, based on different cost per lead and lead funnel and sales ratios, what you're going to end up with as a return on ad spend. So for example, if you're setting targets based on return on ad spend, based on some of your business objectives and outcomes and operational factors, you can then use these projections to make sure that those marketing objectives that you set are going to be on track to deliver your business objectives. So yeah, again, it's 101 stuff, but it's good to revisit this and make sure that, not just that we're doing each one of these independently, but that all of these components come together to form a well-oiled machine that has been adapted to the new normal, I guess, as we're calling it these days. That should leave us with a pretty solid strategy to be able to adapt to the crisis. And I will hand you back to Jess.
Thanks, Stuart. So this stuff is obviously always a lot easier said than done. So it was really great to hear not just how we should be going about it, but how we can tactically go about some of these activities. So guys, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time slot, but we will be sending you an FAQ answering those questions that you guys put in the Q&A box. And as Stuart mentioned, we do have some goodies for you guys. Vision 6 and Hello Digital have put together some templates for you. So we will be sending a campaign funnel projections template, a pest analysis template, a monthly customer acquisition cost template, and a SWOT analysis template. So these are all things that we, both Vision 6 and Hello Digital, actually use ourselves for our own teams. So hopefully you find some good use out of them. Thank you so much to Stuart and the guys at Hello Digital for joining us today and sharing some of their wisdom with you guys. And thank you to everyone who joined in to listen. We will send you those resources, so keep an eye out, and we will see you at our next webinar. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.